You are listening to Journeys on Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com and simulcast with wolfspiritradio.com. Join Jaypee, your tour guide today, on this journey of discovery from the known to the unknown in search of enlightenment, knowledge, and truth.
Good evening, welcome, and May the 18th. Oh my God, have I lost the signal again? Oh well, I don't know if I've dropped it or not, but anyway, we'll see see what's happening. This thing keeps spinning around in blue. I keep getting hit. I might have to reset the call in a little while. I've been attacked all night, so I must be doing something good. Tonight, May the 18th, as I said, it's 2015. And we've been waiting a long time for this moment. You know, when I was young, I heard about UFOs and I thought, I think there's something to this. And everybody says, no, there's nothing to this. You're completely insane. It's the stuff of stuff. You're just mad if you think that that's real. Anyway, so further down the road, we all start discovering actually people are being killed because they're saying the truth and it's not allowed out. There's a death penalty. But now, something new. It's been the battle has been raging to bring the truth out to the people. And my guest tonight is one of those people who has been involved in the disclosure event, whatever that might be. So tonight we're going to find out what that bee is, actually. Dan Willis, how are you, my friend? What's going on?
Jaypee, I appreciate being on your show this evening. Thank you.
So where would you like to start your presentation?
Well, I guess I should give a little background. I'm just one witness out of over 500 witnesses. I had a high-level top-secret clearance in the military, and I guess this is way back in 1969. I was in communications. I mean, my witness testimony, I think, is a very, very insignificant small part to the whole picture when you look at all the witness testimonies. But one of the Navy ships off the coast of Alaska was receiving a report that was secret, classified, priority level, that the crew is witnessing coming off of port bow, a brightly glowing reddish-orange saucer, elliptical object about 70 feet in diameter that shot out in front of the ship and went about 7,000 miles per hour, according to the radar operator, and went off into space. This was 1969. I was a high-speed code operator. That always stuck with me, because it was going to Chief of Naval Operations, and so obviously somebody in the Navy knew about these extraterrestrial vehicles. I've been studying it, over the years, and it's always hear little stories here and there, like little, I guess you could call it glitches in the Matrix. It wasn't until about 2000 that I heard that Dr. Greer was planning on doing a world disclosure event at the National Press Club. All this was brought about because during the Clinton administration, Clinton had a high interest in the UFO subject, and he had a CIA director, James Woolsey, attempt to get the files on the UFOs. When he did, here the director of Central Intelligence is being denied access, right? You think if anybody would have, security clearance. So,
indeed.
What happened was,
yeah, go on.
I'm sorry, say again?
We have a tiny delay on this line, but that's fine. You just keep going with your story. That was also a story that I heard that, wasn't it? Didn't that happen to Jimmy Carter as well? Is that, yeah, George H.W. Bush was in charge of the CIA at the time, said, Mr. President, you haven't got the clearance. Isn't that the same as Carter?
Oh, yeah, that was, it was Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter, that was one of his campaign promises, that he would, release the UFO files, but the then director of Central Intelligence was George H.W. Bush, George W.'s father. And he was denied access. In fact, one of the 21 witnesses that joined me in Washington was Daniel Sheehan, the famous Washington attorney, who was witness to that. So anyway, James Woolsey was denied access. This is back in 1993. So Dr. Greer, meeting with the CIA director, since obviously you couldn't go through normal traditional military channels, he had a meeting with the director, and he brought a huge stack of papers and photos and whatnot, and the director said, I know the subject's real, I'm just trying to figure out why the hell I can't gain access to it. And so Dr. Greer, becoming aware of the gravity of the situation, he met with some military advisors, and in 93 they decided that you bring one or two witnesses forward, like you mentioned earlier, they get bumped off or discredited. And so the plan was to gather hundreds of witnesses, and that's just exactly what they did. Between 1993 and 2000, I was the 100th videotaped witness, and what happened was Dr. Greer had his life threatened not to go forward with all this information with these. At the time, it was 450 witnesses. Now there's over 500. But he courageously proceeded. Some of the witness testimonies that were disclosed during that time we're talking about an alien base on the other side of the moon, 57 different species already categorized by 1989, nuclear missiles being shut down, Captain Robert Salas, NASA airbrushing the UFOs before releasing to the public. And one of the most critical things, I thought, was that we've had a solution to get off of oil and nuclear and coal for over 60 years, that we had the scientists within these black projects that were willing to come forth once released of the national security oaths, forth to the open congressional hearing and prove, in other words, put the energy device on the table, that we haven't needed oil and whatnot, for all these years. Of course, the Bush administration denied a hearing on that. What happened, what followed after that was the mainstream media that covered the event basically, said that, here's a group with 450 witnesses, and they're basically wanting to have a congressional hearing based on the reality of UFOs. And, of course, that's not going to grab anybody's attention. So, Dr. Greer then traveled across the United States to major cities. Since the mainstream media, there was 22 cameras in the back row of the National Press Club recording this entire explosive event. The first hour, there was like 250,000 people signed on to the National Press Club to watch the online video feed live, but the first hour was jammed electronically. Some of the inside sources believe it was the NSA.
That never happens. That never happens.
So since the mainstream media, basically sanitized it out, what happened, we went from city to city, and without exception, every city that we went to, the local networks, they used the giggle factor, and in San Francisco they're saying, the Disclosure Project's looking to aliens to solve the world's energy problems, and San Diego had dancing alien dolls with smoke, and onward and so forth. So pretty much what really shocked me, Jaypee, was that CBS, after being on CNN, CBS wanted to do an interview with me. And I said, look, I'm not willing to do this interview unless I could just say the short sentence, and that is that we have these scientists within these black projects that are willing to bring forth a solution to stop further environmental damage, to get off of, oil, nuclear, and whatever. They promised up and down. After they interviewed me about 45 minutes, they basically did a cookie cutter, exactly like CNN did. The director of the show was in tears almost. She said, I've never had this happen before. I know I promised you, but the higher executives made me cut that part out. So, it really shocked me when, I was naive when I went to Washington. I'm just a witness. I'm not a UFO historian or anything like that. So I was just getting up to speed myself, realizing just how controlled this whole matrix of perception that they have on this whole subject, because the UFO extraterrestrial subject matter is a key to unlocking the secret activities that have been going on this planet for some time. So, I have a few audio clips I could play that give the audience. It's different with different audiences. Some people are like this is old hat. This is nothing new. It's like preaching to the choir, so to speak. While other people, this is like new to them, But if you'd like, I can play some of the witness testimonies and give an idea of what was disclosed back then.
Well,
this was, by the way.
Although I think most of the people listening have already absorbed the information that came out during the disclosure thing. It's like it was a while ago now. And it's amazing how information leaches from these. It's like it's like a blotting paper. The speed with which new information is rapidly absorbed into the kind of collective consciousness of people who are seeking the truth. So basically, you can regard us as
that's far greater than a lie.
Yes,
it has a way of
So basically, you can assume that our audience are kind of up to speed, and we want to know what hasn't been said publicly. That's more where we're at. How do we take it further? What is the next steps? Because something might have been disclosed. Oh yeah, we got some film from a few years ago of some UFO doing something. But there's a lot more to come out. That is the reality of our relationship with other races. And, it's not a simple thing. It's really, 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 really complicated.
Yes, it is. It takes a while. It's a transition from, I guess you could say, the blue pill reality to the red pill reality. It took me a while, even though I was going to Washington to testify at her oath. It took me a while to wrap my head around what has been going on all these years, and it wasn't until 2014, last year, that a company out of Hollywood, so I used to be an ABC newsman, I was a broadcast engineer involved in all of that for a long time, and I started becoming aware of how the media is very carefully sanitizing this. And so I wrote this article for this at a request called Who Controls the Agreed Upon Reality Through the Mainstream Media, and Why They Fear Disclosing the Truth About the Extraterrestrial Reality. And so I had to do I dug into books for a couple of months and researched a lot of reputable sources. And quite for me, there's probably a lot of listeners that are way myself, but I had no idea that the Nazis infiltrated into the CIA and NASA and the entire situation with what really happened at the end of World War II, and how the Rockefeller Foundation came in 1946 and actually, you think it'd be criminal to do this, but they actually heard what happened in the history books that children read about what happened in World War II. And then, the whole story about, 250,000 Nazis, some of the high command, some of the top scientists that then come over in Project Paperclip, the Antarctic base, then, General Byrd going down there attempting to attack it, the whole situation with James Forrestal over there in May of 1945, along with John F. Kennedy, to look at some of the technologies that were so far advanced. Apparently, some type of technology exchange thing happened with an extraterrestrial race back in '36, and the technologies were way beyond anything that we had, and that's why they started Project Paperclip. So Kennedy was well aware of the extraterrestrial reality, being in Office of Naval Intelligence and seeing reports that as far back as 1942. So, and then what happened with the Eisenhower era when he had Nelson Rockefeller restructure MJ-12, which was originally set up by Truman, as everybody knows, and then took our legal constitutional government out of jurisdiction with MJ-12, with the CIA setting up in Area 51 and everything. So what this whole thing does is it opens up to a greater understanding of this cabal or secret government that is like a fraction working together with the banking elite that originally funded the Nazis into existence, with Allen Dulles there at the first meeting, and Kennedy firing Dulles for his, subversive activities he was doing behind the scenes. And then Allen Dulles actually setting up an assassination directive that, because Kennedy was trying to regain, working together with Eisenhower, to regain the control of our government from this cabal. But since 1954, they've pretty much are operating on their own and with their own resources and outside of our legal constitutional government.
Yeah, because they basically got enough funds. They got more funds than the average country, because they've. That's where all the money from the $300 toilet seats came from. The famous thing. Listen, I want to reset this call. Just if you can, pick it back up again. We'll see if we can get a better line. One moment. Okay, so we're back on the air, and let's see if this is going to improve things. Okay, so excuse us, Dan. I've had a great internet connection all day, and as soon as we start talking about this stuff, that's when I have to keep rebooting my routers, because they send the squiddies on to me. Anyway, so basically, I was saying exactly this story in the previous show on the on this station, on the other channel, that we. What we're looking at in terms of what we call the military-industrial complex is indeed the Nazi war machine, but basically scaled up, planet-sized.
Yeah, it's I guess the cabal is the good general term, for these guys. I guess it's like the banking elite. The Nazis basically they were of the same, of the same mentality, the same agenda. They wanted a one world order, a totalitarian fascist dictatorship. They're all on board with the same thinking. And so the Nazis are just a faction within this group that acted as a very valuable instrument, because back when they cut a deal with Reinhard Gehlen Alan Dulles did, to bring in, 3,000 Nazi intelligence people, and then I released another 5,000 through Argentina and throughout South America, and got involved in the Bell Project, as you're well aware. The thing is that, and in NASA as well, so we have a situation that they used to say we had two CIAs. One was hunting down Nazis, and the other one's recruiting them. And, just recently, the FBI just released hundreds of documents that, J. Edgar Hoover, a 33rd degree Freemason, and, it's interesting, all the people tied in the secret societies, high-level Freemasons at the highest level, the 33rd degree, Knights of Malta, Skull and Bones, all these groups seem to have some kind of coordinated effort. I'm not sure how it all ties together, but you keep seeing these certain heavy players that are high level. Like, say, for example, after Kennedy was murdered, Lyndon B. Johnson was a 33rd degree Freemason. Earl Warren, head of the Warren Commission that determined that it was a lone gunman, he was a 33rd degree Freemason. Alan Dulles was a 33rd degree Freemason. Gerald Ford, who tried to say the bullet was actually higher on the skull, actually tried to manipulate the situation. He was a 33rd degree Freemason. So you have all these people, and you have to wonder, because the 33rd degree is an honorary degree. You can only get there if you're elected. You can never do anything on your own to obtain that degree. And so you have almost like in the military, where you have a pyramidal chain of command structure, where the higher levels dictate to the lower levels, and the lower levels don't question. So if you were to infiltrate into a government and get your people in high executive positions and, within secret societies and things. And Kennedy tried to warn the American people about the dangers of secrecy and of secret societies. Because the only way this group can continue to exist is through secrecy. Because if the public ever became aware of what their agendas are and what their operations are, there would be a huge outrage. So this is why it's so important that they totally control the perception through the mainstream media, which Alan Dulles started with Operation Mockingbird back in 1950. They controlled the education, and ever since 1951, every movie that has to do with anything with extraterrestrials or the moon or UFOs or anything like that has been manipulated, by the CIA and scripting ever since the day the Earth stood still in 1951. So, you see all these evil alien movies, with that from Hollywood. And if you look at some of the leaked reports, like the one that came out of Iron Mountain, that LBJ hit the roof and suppressed it for all time, they were planning on generating some type of threat from outer space, the contrived threat. And this was echoed, of course, by Wernher von Braun on deathbed testimony, saying, the first threat would be the Soviets. That would be a lie. And we find out that, General Reinhard Gehlen was giving false estimates of the Soviets because Truman wanted to shut down the CIA. And so that means I would cut off their funding, because they had all their Nazi spies on the CIA payroll. And so all this money, I think it's about $8 trillion in the Cold War was generated from that. And we're going to our $6 trillion in the Middle Eastern wars that have been going on. And all these false flag events that are happening, he was talking about the Soviets, and then there's terrorists, and we definitely had our terrorist situation. And then, later would be asteroids, and the final one would be an extraterrestrial threat that we would have to join our military forces together and as a one world government and fight this alien foe, as Ronald Reagan spoke of at the UN, and as interestingly enough, Clinton on Jimmy Kimmel Live said, it's kind of interesting when he was on television, everybody was watching this thing. And first thing out of Jimmy Kimmel's mouth is like, okay, tell us about the extraterrestrials, and he says, well, okay, I send my aides over there to Area 51 and there was no aliens. And, well, he didn't send his aides because Dr. Greer, in front of, the 22 cameras of the, his CIA director was denied access, basically. And Clinton said, well, let's just hope it's not like Independence Day, where we'd have to dissolve our differences, almost paralleling the speech of Reagan, and join together and, and make nice, the way he put it, and, fight this alien foe. So there's something in the works, and it's a perception matrix that every single human being is born into. When the Nazis, before the end of the war, World War II, the Nazis had a plan, and they called it Balkenschallenskrieg, which translates as worldview warfare, which means they planned to infiltrate into the United States and over a long period of time gradually control the perception matrix where everybody observing things, and this has to do with even in science, they would only come to certain conclusions based on certain lines of thinking because of the indoctrination through the education system, through the media, and so forth. I have a pretty good technical background. I worked for about 13 years working on satellites and everything for the government, worked on about every piece of electronic equipment they had. After the congressional hearing was denied, Dr. Greer set up a corporation. Since we couldn't bring the scientists from the black projects to testify and prove that we have a solution to get off of nuclear, so we don't have Fukushimas and things like that, I traveled around the planet with Professor Ted Loiter, and we met with scientists and inventors that had over-unity energy devices, and I was vetting these technologies. There was one down in the Dominican Republic. I flew down there, and just before getting there, the inventors said 2 CIA guys met with him, but they left as soon as we showed up. They said, "This works, you're dead." Anyway, it's a long nightmare of meeting with all these scientists and inventors that had like SWAT teams come in, clean out their laboratories, but most of them get what's called a national security order. Am I still with you, Jaypee?
Yep, you're still with me, and it's a fantastic idea.
Okay. I just want to make sure you can go off and find out I'm disconnected. These national security orders basically it was a secret program that was just recently revealed within the U.S. Patent Office, the Sensitive Application Warning System, or SAWS. It's a national security apparatus that anybody that comes up with any type of energy solution, over unity, anti-gravity, superconductivity, any solar cell that's over a certain amount of efficiency, anything, in other words, that would threaten the status quo of oil, nuclear, and coal and all that, automatically gets one of these, and I put it up on my website on the article on thewebmatrix.net. You can actually see what the national security order looks like, where basically it's a gag order that anybody you've shared your invention with you have to give them the names, and you cannot share this with anybody. It's dead in the water. Over 5,100 and so of these have been issued that have been solutions to the world. You have to think. There's a lot of intelligent minds that not necessarily have to reverse engineer extraterrestrial technology on this planet, and it gets kind of blatantly obvious that the entire humanity has been kept in this stranglehold. That's why we're still driving gasoline vehicles. That's why we're still using these dangerous leaking nuclear power plants and the coal that pollutes the air. Doesn't it seem... a lot of people just take it for granted and just say, oh, well, that's the best we can do. But no, that's not the best we can do. There's over 5,000 inventions that could solve that problem that have been purposely suppressed. And while they have suppressed all of humanity, at the same time, they have built as Richard Dolan calls it, a breakaway civilization with advances in technology that makes it look to the average person like science fiction. Along with the secret space program and across the board, with advances in science, genetics, all these things. I think it was Paul Hillers told me that it was like 80 people on the planet own more than half of the entire wealth of this planet. So this elite cabal has their own little precious, operations going on with super advanced technologies, the underground facilities and everything, while the rest of humanity is in the condition that it's in. And this is why it's important, I think, to do these talk shows. That's why Zabrinsky, who, along with David Rockefeller, created the Trilateral Commission, said that there's a global awakening happening right now because of the alternative media of the internet, because of shows like yours. And also if you look at it from a more of a metaphysical point of view, I guess you could say, but it's been well documented, morphogenic fields and whatnot, 100th monkey situation, that, when people come up with inventions or ideas, all of a sudden across the planet somebody else comes up with the same idea, or even in art or science or anything, there's a collective consciousness that all of us are tied into. And so as more people, because of the alternative media of the internet, more people are becoming aware of the glitches in the matrix and starting to put the dots together and starting to see what reality we have been indoctrinated into and what type of a world has been suppressed from all of humanity. We don't even, like in Back to the Future, Doc Brown said, we don't even need roads. We have anti-gravity was back in the 40s. One of the witnesses that joined me in Washington, by the way, each one of us said we were willing to testify under oath, we're breaking national security oaths, and that we're willing to testify under oath before Congress. So it's not like, there's no no force behind this whole thing. One of the witnesses, Mark McCandish, his colleague, witnessed the alien reproduction vehicles back in 1988, and these were built back in the 50s. And I sat down at the bar in Washington with Mark, and he was a technical illustrator, and he went over the details because he knew I had a good technical background, and he described how the alien reproduction was functioning using a tube in the middle that had like a mercury plasma with a Tesla configuration around it and capacitors on the bottom. And this thing would start up like with a submarine battery that was hooked onto the thing. You hit the starter button, and the thing would go actually superluminal. It would go faster than the speed of light. And, in just my own research, I found it kind of fascinating because there was a lot of correlations with this And it seemed like you had some experience with Bell and researching that about the counter-rotational mercury plasma fields that they were experimenting with, creating an anti-gravity effect. But this is like back in ancient India, where the Brahmanas were using a whirling mercury engine to create an anti-gravity lift. In my own research, I noticed that the British sunk two U-boats back in 1944, one up by Norway, another one near Australia, probably going down to Antarctic. One had 67 tons of sealed glass containers filled with mercury. The other one had 33 tons. That's a lot of mercury thermometers, you know. So, they had these underground bases. They were masters at underground facilities. According to Colonel Wendell Stevens, who worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, he saw documentation that there was 9 saucer disk factories in Germany. They were all relocated. One was destroyed, but some were relocated down in New Schwabenland, the base 211 underneath the Antarctic, one in Brazil and the other one up in Norway. And so they continued on with these disk factories that nobody is aware of because it's all underground. Anyway, it's all quite fascinating when you dig into it and you start finding all these witness testimonies. And I would say pretty much everything that I base as far as hardcore, solid fact evidence is the 500 witness testimonies, which include astronauts, generals, admirals, along with the authenticated, top secret documents that have been leaked and the collaborating documents that a lot of these witnesses have. That's a pretty hard one to disprove. Granted, there's a lot of disinformation on the internet, and so I always try to reference back to all the base of witnesses, for a solid foundation to go by, so you don't go off. But there's, as I say, truth is stranger than fiction. And anyway, what's your thoughts on all that?
Well, here's the thing. I've been producing for over a couple of years now, a gentleman by the name of Sean David Morton. He had a connection with a man who was essentially the guy who ran the secret space program for 40 years, up until the end of the 90s. And when this man, quote, moved on, unquote, he sent Sean his journals, and Sean made a book out of it. And it explains the whole relationship between Montauk and the Area 51 and Dulce, and what was going on in Dulce, and the war, and the Clinton thing, in that they they basically moved the whole place and then said, Clinton, okay, you can come here. They moved, and who is it? Somebody put it in the chat room here. This is how awake and aware these guys are in our listenership. It's a very broad listenership, very large listenership. Here we go. This is from Stardust Man, who called into our show just a little while ago. Area 51 has not housed aliens for a long time. They were transferred to Section 4, S4, and now they have been transferred to a place unknown to us. Hence the need for new whistleblowers. That's from a listener in the chat room here.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Somewhere up in Utah is what I heard, but I don't have anything to back that up, other than something that Dr. Greer mentioned to me.
Well, you see, people in the Freemasons and like Mormons and these religious groups, they know how to keep a secret, and that's why they're entrusted with secrets. Unlike me,
That's right.
I'm a blabber. Don't tell me that. Because I'm building the big puzzle, and everybody's secrets create the answer to the whole puzzle. That's the thing, and people are unwilling to share. but we need to share. You need to tell me because I can tell everybody else. I'm not gonna keep it for myself. I'm gonna tell everybody as soon as I find a new piece. Here's a new piece. Only recently, a few months ago, I discovered the significance of the Bell Project and what the time travel. What would be the worst thing, right? You can imagine. Nazis with super weapons. Well, okay. How about Nazis with how about Nazis with time travel? That's pretty serious, isn't it? That's not a good thing. That'd be the worst, time traveling Nazis. But they actually did it. From what I can understand, that's Kecksburg. Is that they disappeared in 1944 and reappeared in 1964. And as far as they concerned, no time had passed from within the Bell. And that were two there's a man and a woman, Rudolf Seeger and someone who was called Helga. Have you heard that story, the Kecksburg story?
Somewhat. My actual attorney friend, he was Andy Visaggio. Before he went public, we shared a lot of information about the Pegasus project and being able to Looking Glass and I've looked into a little bit of that's something to really get your head around is the whole time travel thing. But it's a very real thing that the science that people are taught in school on the outside world here is a whole different situation. Just like Ben Rich said, anything in the Black Project, head of Lockheed Skunk Works, anything you can imagine, we already know how to do. We figured out an error in the equations that we can take ET home, won't take a lifetime to do it, and all that. So, the technology they have in these Black Projects are so far beyond. It was because of the 2001 National Press Club is what motivated Gary McKinnon, to hack into the NASA to try to find out the truth about the situation. Where he found the non-terrestrial officer list and the USSSS different craft, which sounds like United States spaceship. So more and more is leaking out about the secret space program, which is a good thing. I'm just wondering. A lot of people understand this. People who start to research. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to the show have already done their share of researching and connecting the dots. And we can talk about it a lot. I'm just wondering. More along the lines of what kind of a message of empowerment can we give to people of, transforming this reality. Paul Hellyer just recently gave a grave warning of the dangers of the enemy within the United States, basically citing that, the Nazis did infiltrate and have taken over control of the government, and this cabal that's tied into the banking elite is basically calling the shots behind the scenes, and they have an agenda that is operating in secrecy. And like you said, in the Freemasons, at the highest levels, by the time the starting Freemasons, they have this blood oath of secrecy, and they'll do horrible things to you. They say, if you release any secrecy. So by the time you get up to the highest degree, just like Admiral Byrd was a 33rd degree Freemason, you keep secrets pretty darn well.
Well, we've also been exploring the dark world of oath-taking ceremonies, It's essentially, you're caused to do worse and worse things to other people that you could never reveal in public, often involving murder and torture and really hurting people and being being totally responsible for hurting somebody, and knowing that these guys know what they know about you, and it's all filmed and etc. And that's how you get into these high degrees, and to get these high echelons, you have to do worse and worse things, and to be you have to be, unless you're really like the biggest double agent, you have to do these things, and they're really awful.
Well, their only power is secrecy. The people's power is disclosure. Putting a huge spotlight on this whole situation.
Well put.
And
I felt this evening I was just kind of meditating before the shows, and when we're talking about disclosure, it's as if we took an enormous searchlight and shone it into the sky above to reveal the puppet masters pulling the strings.
Yeah, and for humanity, spiritually to evolve, we need to have truth over this deception, and there needs to be a certain degree of freedom that is, responsibly used. And the thing is that it's really the perversion of the golden rule. People have been controlled for, since way back when by whoever has the gold makes the rules, and that's the situation, today. But it really should be that, people do to other people what, they would feel comfortable having done to themselves. That's where we must evolve to if we are to move forward, as a sustainable race. Otherwise, you have all these people who are control freaks, and some are quite psychopathic, I imagine. And basically, everybody of that same mentality, they must be fighting within themselves the different factions. I would imagine.
Well, it does seem that there are, from what I don't know, but there are factions of all different directions. Factions from below, factions from above, factions from left and right, north and south, and they're all vying, they're all contending for the source of the new the new cash for the new stuff. Which is the deal with them is, we give you our people and our DNA and their blood, and you give us stuff, you give us toys. What we gonna get? Whereas that's not the best kind of attitude when you're sort of not alone on a planet.
And secrecy is the only way they can operate. You think back to 1776, even, when the United States was formed. At the same time, Rothschild had Adam Weishaupt set up the Illuminati, Bavarian Illuminati, which infiltrated into the Freemasons. And one of the things they, on the lineup of things they were planning on doing is they wanted to make sure everybody was fully armed. And then they would set up incidences and situations. Some people call it false flags or provocateurs. And they plan to destroy the governments, they just plan to destroy religion, and with everybody armed and manipulating the information, eventually they would destroy each other. They could operate as a proxy, so to speak. And the main thing that they wanted to make sure is they had to have absolute control of the press. That happened back in 1917 when it was it was Rockefeller, Jaypee Morgan, and Warburg who wrote in part the Federal Reserve Act back in 1913. They purchased all the main newspapers and put their own editors in so they could create the perception in the newspapers that was favorable, to their investments and situation. And so this was going on way back then in the in the early 50s and everything, it just got more sophisticated, and today it's very highly refined, where the CIA basically has, the journalists are now non-official covers that are operating for the CIA, that are fed stories, and it looks like, it's coming from these independent sources, but they're actually non-official covers for the CIA. The CIA controls all the distribution of the information, and you can test that by trying to go on a mainstream media and talk about UFOs. And they're tied into billions of dollars of think tanks that are tied into the Tavistock Institute over there in London, and all working together for the engineering of consent is what they called it. They were doing testing, Rockefeller, back in 1938 with the War of the Worlds broadcast with Orson Welles, saying a fake alien invasion from Mars coming in, and they analyzed the heck out of that. And even when General Wild Bill Donovan set up, with Churchill and Roosevelt set up the OSS, working with Tavistock in the psychological warfare department, they wanted to have a absolute full spectrum dominance, is what they call it, of the entire matrix of perception of the public, with the important calculated application of terror. So when people are in terror and fear, they've learned they can control people. And this, if you ever flipped through the television channels, just about every channel you got some type of movies and things. Somebody's killing or hurting another human on one channel after another, delivered through a myriad of crime dramas. And then in soap operas for the women, everything's based on deception and cheating on each other. Because they found that when the family unit is torn apart, the man and woman, and the people are set afloat, they're much more easier to manipulate. And when people are in a state of stress and fear, they find they're much more easier to manipulate. And so the mainstream entertainment industry seems to be barraged with all this imagery. I call it the kill and hurt human programming. And even in China, they've actually created an entire industry that takes the U.S. movies, since we create so many of them, and they remove a lot of the violence because they believe it has an unhealthy effect for their society. So there's a method to that madness, and when you start looking into it, you start seeing that there is an entire situation that the Nazis called Weltanschauungskrieg going on in the world right now.
And that's essentially that would translate to shock and awe, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jaypee. You broke up for a second.
Sorry, that would I imagine that would translate to something like shock and awe. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that fits into the formula,
Absolutely.
Put everybody in terror, a state of terror, and they're easily controlled.
Yes, I mean, one of the other things, one of the other little campaigns of mine is the 432 campaign. I don't know if you're aware of the musical frequencies of 432 hertz versus 440 and all of that stuff.
Didn't Joseph
Correct.
So I'm pronouncing it correctly. He was interesting. The head of the public enlightenment and propaganda for the Nazis. Was manipulating these frequencies.
That's right. I mean, they've tweaked the whole frequency of the planet, and it's very reasonable sounding. 440. Oh well, it's easily divided by 11, isn't it, or something? But it's taken it onto a different octave. It's taken it out of balance. Into something that is like kind of falling forwards and never quite being stable in and of itself, and stumbling forward. That's the feeling that I get with 440 music these days. It's kind of it's unbalancing.
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of research into that, but it's one of the sacred sciences, of Pythagoras, music, geometry, astronomy, astrology, and all that. There's resonances that harmonize, and there's resonances that deharmonize. I was working with a scientist back in the 80s that was doing some work with the CIA, and the brainwave entrainments. They found that certain frequencies can cause the left and right hemispheres to desynchronize. And I was actually, when I was working for the Naval Electronic Engineering Center in San Diego for about 13 years, I was doing an experiment with what I was learning. And the Navy captain that was working with me, we were wrapping up some satellite equipment, and I accidentally put it on the frequency that disassociated the left and right hemisphere, and he was trying to wrap this thing, and this is something he could do in his sleep. He's done it years, and he threw both of his arms down and says, "What the hell's going on here?" Like that. And I looked at the frequency and was on period measurements instead of frequency, so I didn't realize it, and I said, uh-oh. So it was a great double-blind experiment, because I had no idea.
Okay, yeah, we're up against a hard... Yeah, amazing, that went quick. It went faster than light. Listen, we'll be back very, very quickly in a few beats of your heart on the other side of this break. Stay tuned to Revolution Radio, a 100% listener-supported station. Squiddly-doo. Welcome back to Journeys with Jaypee, myself, here in Scotland, on the end of a wet, damp, lank piece of woolen twine attached to the end of a can on a cardboard diaphragm that's been rained on for the last 16 years. Yeah, I have a miserable internet connection. It's really rubbish, and I'm sorry about it, and I'm really sorry. I'm getting the truth out as best as I can. It'll all be in the archives, and you can get the archives from everbeyondradio.com, and also from wolfspiritradio.com for the week. If you want to get the older ones, you can subscribe. It's very cheap. Also, you can subscribe to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. It's a listener-donated station, and my favorite thing for donations is you give them, I think, $100, and you get enough seeds to last you for like 20 years, and they'll stay in the freezer for 25 years, and you can grow tomatoes and useful vegetables that will keep you going, and you don't have to go to the supermarket, so you don't have to use diesel. And anyway, they'll bring us back to our current subject, which is the idea of disclosure. Now, I'm on here with Dan Willis, who's been part of the big disclosure movement over the last few years, and so, as I said, we're kind of really up to speed on all of that. So let's drill down, and what I'd like to talk about is what I've been calling for many years black science, or black project science. In that it's the science that has been written out of our textbooks. And I've spoken with a member of Project Pegasus, who you mentioned before, William Stillings, over many shows over here, really drilling out of him as much black science as I can. So if you would like to contribute to the pool of information about black science, please be my guest. You are my guest, Dan Willis. The floor is yours.
No, okay. Well, I'd like to put a plug here for Revolution Radio. Let's all support the nightmare of Brzezinski of being afraid that there's going to be a global awakening due to the alternative media of the internet. So support people like Revolution Radio. They're doing good things. Let's go in much deeper. go into some of the aspects. It's kind of interesting back 1944 when I think it's Colonel Scorsese, discovered based on Otto Rand's research on the Holy Grail. They found the treasure in southern France, and besides a huge amount of gold and everything, which they brought over with Operation Eagle Flight, which they bought 750 corporations. You have to wonder how many corporations are operating today that were originally front operations for the Nazis. They also found ancient knowledge, tablets and scrolls and things, and this was information that the Knights of Templar were guarding. It came from King Solomon's Temple from Mesopotamia, that go back all the way to the ancient mystery schools of Egypt during the time of Akhenaten. And you look at Akhenaten, look at the skull on that guy. I mean, he's not a normal human. He had one of these elongated skulls, and there's a lot of pictures on the internet of, they found him in Peru and Egypt and different places, that, this large elongated skull. So, may very well have been an extraterrestrial that was operating these mystery schools and the knowledge thereof. They, as you know, they cleaned out all the libraries and things of all the metaphysical knowledge, and a lot of that was, taken down to Antarctica. So you have to wonder, because Himmler, up in Wellsburg Castle, I think it was called, they would get a certain bloodline of Nazi SS elite, and they would all focus together on a visualization, for a group, like a group focus, in order to manifest what the agenda they were working on. Because they were all over that stuff, seeking all over through India and Tibet. They searched everywhere for ancient occult knowledge that could reveal advanced technology of the ancients. That's why they were all over Antarctica, because it appeared that it was a pole shift, that occurred, that whole landmass that was Antarctica, according to the ancient maps back in the Paris Rice? I'm terrible at pronouncing things, forgive me. But it was the map that was hundreds of years old, and they found it was actually more accurate than the current maps. And, it wasn't that long ago that they discovered pyramids down in Antarctica. And I was looking at one picture of it, and I have a good eye for geometry. I was looking at the angle of it, and it lined it up with the Great Pyramid, the 52-degree angle, which of course incorporates the old mean ratio and all these cosmic mathematics that go into infinity.
1/7 of a circle.
Yeah. So they're very much into the dark arts, I guess you could say, of the mystical teachings. Back in 1957, there was this conspiracy, according to the professor over there in Professor Isaacson, I think it was. It was like 30 universities that were taking out of the books on psychology and sociology all the connections with consciousness and these sciences. They didn't want people to understand the powers that we have within us, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners have seen some of the postings by Greg Braden, where they had a hospital over in Beijing, and this woman has a tumor, and they got these 3 practitioners that are creating a coherent, agreed-upon reality that it's perfectly fine, it's already done, it's already happened, it's already healed. In other words, they're creating that reality coherently together, and they're chanting that. And as they're watching on the screen, they had a fixed image of the original screenshot of it while they're watching a real-time image and watching it completely disappear. And that's pretty much a key in understanding, and anybody who, studies consciousness and things, they start to realize that, yes, we are creative beings. We're, as they say, made in image and likeness of God, and therefore we create. I work with a scientist the top scientist of IBM, back in the early 80s. I have to admit, I had a rather bizarre Kundalini ET experience where I saw this being, and he conveyed something I was totally unfamiliar with, a geometry of consciousness. He was projecting the sphere in space, and as I watched the sphere change into like a six-pointed star, like a star tetrahedron, and then another geometry within that one, another one within that, and it went into infinity, turned back into the perfect sphere, and the being was, I'm making a long story short, that through love we evolve from one level to the next. In actuality, all of us are connected into this one totality of a perfect sphere. And so I had this Kundalini experience of millions of volts going through my hands and feet while this whole thing going, and this being with a large head and eyes. Anyway, that was 1976, and it left an impact on me so that I had no idea. I didn't know what the Pythagorean solids were or anything like that, so I started grabbing every book I could on the subject matter. I found that Dr. Marcel Vogel of IBM, who was still working with IBM, who was written up in The Secret Life of Plants, where he was able to communicate to the plant from the other side of the planet, from Prague, Czechoslovakia, and cause it on a script chart recorder to respond. And they started working with these crystals, and they found that in a dream he was given this geometry, which is like of a tree of life, where it cohered the energies of thought. And he was working with 24 medical doctors, and I traveled to the crystal mines in Arkansas and brought him thousands of crystals, and he opened up a laboratory, full laboratory, electron microscope, spectrophotometers, everything, and we were studying and researching these energies. I had some very interesting experiences with that. But anyway, the reason there is this collective matrix that appears to have a geometrical aspect to it, that in which consciousness interacts with. I won't go too far deep in that.
No. Go deep. Go deep.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. I made a website on that. It's in his honor, Marcel Vogel, VOGEL.org, and it has all my lab notes and much of the information in detail. It had incredible things where the first time I met him, I drove through a storm from San Diego up to San Jose where he was, and knocked on his door at night. He invited me in and listened to classical music for about half an hour in the dark. And there was a doctor sitting on the couch with me, and this woman knocks on the door, and she brought her daughter. And her daughter had this huge, protruding about half an inch to 3/4 of an inch off of her ankle, and she heard that Dr. Vogel was working and able to heal things. And so I watched as he used these techniques which had to do with breath and focusing of the energy in a very unique way. And sitting with this doctor on the couch, we watched and actually dematerialized the tumor right in front of our very eyes, and that got me very fascinated with the research, and I worked with him for several years after that. It's a key in the understanding is the geometry of this matrix, and I'm still scratching the surface, but there's a lot of notes on there that Nassim Harim, who I met with a bunch of energy inventors in 2001, all had horror stories about, people coming in and cleaning out their laboratories and everything. Anyway, I shared my experience with him, and I didn't know anything about his work, and he was saying, yes, that's it. That's exactly the structure. That's the way it's set up, though it's kind of interesting getting some confirmation. But I often think how we can affect this reality from within us rather than attempting. I think it's good that we do things. I admire, the whistleblowers and witnesses that, courageously have come forward that help, and people speaking out, and you, like doing the radio shows, and all the different people who are, sharing information and wanting to see a transformation happen in this world. But I often think of what we can do within us to transform the world, because there appears to be, a psychological warfare going on, for our minds, coming in through, the television and media and entertainment and education and everything else. So I believe in the power of visualization. And I believe in the power of truth. In fact, I wrote this, I was inspired to write this visualization of the future. If you go to, www.thewebmatrix.net and click on Imagine This, what I wrote was a sort of a, some people might think of a science fictional portrayal of the future, and other people might see it as a premonition of things unfolding right now. And that is, children of the future looking back at Earth's history from a huge depository library that had a very accurate accountability of the whole history of humanity and the extraterrestrial interactions that we had and our religions and everything like that. And they're looking back through time and looking at the challenges of this small group of people that a cabal that has controlled humanity and manipulated things, and how through the alternative media of the internet and through a collective awakening that spread throughout the consciousness on the entire planet. In other words, there's no place to hide from that because we're all connected as one. And science is showing that, the holographic nature. In fact, one of the science experiments I did was working on a camera. You might have heard of this, Jaypee, the Delaware camera. I was working with two other scientists with Marcel. I discovered certain golden mean ratios in the sound cavities, and what this instrument was, and it was patented by the European Patent Office, and I have it on marcelvogel.org, and you can see the pictures where you could tune into somebody no matter where they were in the universe and take a photograph. He took thousands of photographs, Delaware. It was a large instrument. It stood about 5 feet tall. It had resonating chambers, dials. It was a radionic instrument. And the whole thing oscillated and sent the energy up in 3 axes, which had a cavity up above that reflected the energy back onto a photographic plate. My job working with Marcel was we were attempting to bring this technology from the 1950s into the current technology of the early 1980s, which has evolved a lot since then. And what this basically proved is that the nature of reality is very holographic. Within a witness, you could say, a drop of blood or a photograph or a hair or fingernail clippings or whatever, you could take a photo of somebody and you could, even with this instrument, it had a time spiral on it, which I've worked on a number of radionic instruments, and this one was unique in that it could go forwards and backwards in the time. We were talking about that earlier. And, the radionic instrument is nothing of itself. It's basically a tuning focus for the mind. And one example is there was this woman who was pregnant, and he was able to take different levels of gestation, I guess it's called, in the pregnancy, and show the fetal development moving forward in time. And he's even able to go back in time and take a picture of his wedding day. So it's very, very amazing technology, and it kind of reminds me of what Andy Bisaggia was talking about, the Project Looking Glass, where they could actually, much more developed than, the 1950s, look at a certain point in time. So that goes into a whole nother discussion. But anyway, back to visualization. I think, you look on the internet and you see all these different things. Like, say, in the United States, we have Jade Helm going on, the bullets being bought, and 200 military command officers being replaced, and whistleblowers like William Binney of the NSA, top code breakers saying, they don't do anything with terrorists. It's all about population control. And they've got these quantum computers up in Bluffdale, Utah, with yottabytes, centuries of all the planet's communications. And with this technology, a quantum computer operates in multiple universes in parallel at once. The normal computers, most advanced computers that we have today, if it was to break a military-grade encryption, say 512-bit, it would take the known age of the universe to do it. With a quantum computer, you can do it within seconds or within minutes. So it has a processing capability with artificial intelligence, which they are incorporating, to understand the mentality and psyche and conversations of everybody on the planet and, categorize that and whatever. So you see the cabal's activities and movements and whistleblowers start leaking out here and there, and it could be kind of disconcerting, looking at it all. But I like to look at it and see that they're desperately attempting to control the perception matrix. That's why they've made it legal through the NDAA to use a disinformation campaign on the citizens of the United States. Like Snowden leaked about the GCHQ and all the different, sock puppets and shills and trolls and all the different ways in order to manipulate the perception. And now Google is going to be the Ministry of Truth, which will determine which pages now will come up in number one position. In other words, eat your GMO corn, it's good for you, and get your vaccination, and all that will come up on the top, and some of the conspiracy information will be lost in Never Never Land. So they're very afraid right now that people are connecting the dots and putting it together. There's a lot of people that still suspect something going on, but they're too busily just trying to make a living and live, on this planet, to get into all this UFO and conspiracy things. So I would say I'd like to invite everybody to go through that visualization on the webmatrix.net and kind of spike the collective into a reality that we start bringing out these technologies that can put an end to these nuclear reactors, that can put an end to oil and gasoline. We can start retrofitting automobiles with little hydrogen units that use just water to run your automobile. We can eventually replace those with electric vehicles and eventually anti-gravity, so we don't even need vehicles. Replace all the jets and things with anti-gravity transport vehicles. In fact, the nuclear power plants retrofit them with zero-point energy devices that can power the grid without the dangers of this dangerous nuclear waste, which, by the way, in the classified programs, they do have the ability to remediate this waste. And also, with the power and energy that could normally be unfeasible, we could desalinate water, we can make the deserts bloom, grow things, and eventually everybody starts building these little units that could be, the size of a shoebox that you plug your house into, disconnect the grid, and every home and business can have its own power source that's non-polluting, doesn't wear out, pulls from the energy vacuum of space, and we can remove all these ugly power lines all over the place that are CME susceptible to solar flares anyway. And the blue skies can now, besides getting rid of the chemtrails, and now don't have any power lines in it. So there's a whole other world that's sitting potentially to be brought into reality for all of mankind, but it's been hijacked by this cabal group,
by time-traveling Nazis. It's been hijacked by time-traveling Nazis. That's the problem. They've got time travel, and that's how they were able to perfect 9/11 and make it a more and more complete deception, because they ran it a couple of times and then wound time back and then ran it again. So there are several timelines where 9/11... There's one timeline where 9/11 was just an aeroplane flying into a building. And then they kind of made it worse and worse and worse, and then took out insurance and, stuff.
I have no information on that particular myself, but it's pretty obvious, anybody who looks at it, that all the buildings were rigged for controlled demolition, and that a missile hit the Pentagon where they were trying to discover where the $2.3 trillion were missing. All those records were gone. And it's obvious the mainstream media did a very good job on hoodwinking the public to believe that it was, some guy in a cave with a bunch of guys with box cutters. I remember John Lear, who's flown over 100 military jets and things for the CIA. He said, I would be hard pressed in order to make that maneuver, to go into the Pentagon, and the 28 pages that were pulled out, and as soon as that happened, Bush created this executive secrecy order that hid all the presidential archives going all the way back to his dad when he was vice president with Ronald Reagan. So you've got all the secrecy. It's kind of like in your face, hiding things, and all of it's done under the guise of for the good of national security. And it's this national security mechanism is how they been able to control the mainstream media, how they've been able to conduct all their operations. Allen Dulles was very versatile with the Nazis, in getting them to infiltrate and to set up these operations. And when Truman created the CIA with no congressional oversight, he gave them perfect cover. In fact, Truman said 30 days after they murdered Kennedy that he was rather upset that the CIA doesn't account to anybody, and that they running on their own, essentially. I forget the exact quote, but to that effect. It's on my website. It's just 30 days after the assassination of Kennedy, I think Truman realized that, these guys got a free rein with the national security apparatus, and they're able to conduct all these hidden operations that the general public is thinking, well, they need this secrecy in order to protect us, to protect the American people. But there's a lot of leaks and a lot of whistleblowers, a lot of CIA whistleblowers and NSA whistleblowers, as we know, that are painting another story about what's going on.
And indeed what's been going on, which is that your country has been taken over by time-traveling Nazis, and you haven't noticed. They've all changed their names to something more innocuous, like green or black, or Bush, or Cheney, and essentially they have set up a series of shell corporations that have gone beyond planet Earth, and corporations that involve colonies on Mars for many, many years that are essentially, it was on the Daily Show a few weeks ago, and they were talking about. It was a comedy show, and they were talking about gated communities on Mars for billionaires. And treating it as a joke, because, yeah. But if you look at the testimony from Randy Kramer, who's just coming forward, that's exactly what he was guarding against aliens, mantids and reptilians who threatened the territory. And this is the story that's coming out, that the whole solar system is occupied, and that the entire universe is teeming with life. And we're kind of held in a little bubble. Oh, no, nothing's going on. It's like parents trying to hide the fact that they're in a threesome relationship with the maid to the kids. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a bubble matrix. And these corporations, and you like I said earlier, you have to wonder about, over 750 corporations. They had huge amounts of money, the Nazis. Not only, they were funded to the hilt, but they also robbed huge amounts of gold, and besides the King Solomon's treasure, which they set up. And they had help with the banking elite that were already in the United States. So the whole system was already set up and infiltrated, and it worked as a perfect setup. So that one of the disclosure witnesses, Brigadier General Lovkin, he was on Eisenhower's staff, and I have a quick, it's less than 1 minute here, a little clip I'd like to play. And he talks about how Eisenhower basically got sold out and he lost control to these corporations.
In the councils of government, we must carve...
Whoops, wrong one. We know that one. All right, here we go.
But what happened was Eisenhower got sold out. I think that he realized that all of a sudden this matter is going into the control of corporations. He realized that he was losing control. He realized that the phenomenon of whatever it was that we were faced with was not going to be in the best hands, and that those were as far as I can remember, that was the expression that was used. It's not going to be in the best hands, and so it has turned out to be.
And so it's turned out to be. I think he was being conservative by saying that, not going to be in the best hands.
Yeah, understatement indeed. So this is the problem that we're faced with. We seem to be facing nobody's noticed, but hey, folks, the world is just about to be openly taken over by the Nazis. Now, from what I understand, there are a lot of people that are aware of this process going on and indeed are doing things about it, but of course we can't really talk so much about what they're going to do because obviously, hello Herman, whoever's listening, they're going to be listening. They even probably have a huge AI that is filtering out all internet radios so that it can hear what people are talking about it.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. God. When you say that the world's being taken over by Nazis, people think of World War II and all that stuff. The cabal is it's a fascist mindset. It's a totalitarian fascist type regime that total dictatorship is where they're wanting to go. And it's and they can only do this by maintaining the secrecy. That's why they're desperately trying to control the internet through every means possible. And the new, I was just reading in the new net neutrality. It's funny, the names that they use, like Department of Homeland Security should be Department of Homeland Invasion, the Department of Health should be the Department of Death, and then the Food and Drug Administration should be the poison, and it's almost like it's a reverse.
Well, 1984 wasn't a novel, it was a blueprint. And that's exactly, doublespeak is and it's, I would say, it was double plus on good.
Indeed.
So, and so that's how we find it, the old jackboot on the face of humanity. So there has to be a turning from within, right? Because they say, all right, well, humanity has to save itself. So disclosure is the means by which we shine the spotlights, the floodlights up into the sky to reveal who's pulling the strings.
But when the mainstream media is controlled to the degree that it is,
hang on, no. I'd like to say, no, the mainstream media was created for that purpose.
Oh, and indeed, correct.
The educational system was created for this purpose. It's like we've been corralled into little channels that have been dug for us, but we don't realize that we can dig our own channels and create our own little dwellings and buildings and all sorts of things that don't have to be according to rules or regulations. You can, you don't need to be an architect to build a hut, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's interesting that, the Bavarian Illuminati, back in 1776, when they were planning on creating the French Revolution, they wrote out the whole blueprint for it, like you were saying, and they were delivering by courier from Frankfurt to Paris. A lightning bolt killed the courier, of all things, and the Bavarian police discovered this book, and they realized that, hey, there's this group that's planning on pitting people against each other and profiting on all this stuff, because they, as I mentioned earlier, as long as everybody's fully armed, and what they do is they operate at a distance as a proxy with these different elements, and they just basically have everybody annihilate each other, because that's part of their eugenics thing, is the Nazi mentality, is to get rid of the undesirable, for the master race, the more the intelligentsia, the higher DNA, but a true power of the spiritual being is to respect all life and to allow everybody to have their life. The whole world, if, they say that, the human race is using up the resources, but the resources have been being used up because of the withholding of these advanced technologies within these black projects, that the world could be in an entirely different situation. We wouldn't have all the dead fish of the entire in the ocean that's going on in the Pacific because of Fukushima. We would have all kinds of situations and be different if the technologies were released to benefit mankind. But this group, I guess I'd rather have gated communities up on Mars while we watch the rest of this beautiful, beautiful planet be destroyed. But I think people are catching on very quickly, and I think it's going to happen from within us, a global awakening that's going to happen, and that there will be no place for them to hide, and all these deceptions that they've been doing, desperately trying to hide themselves, are all becoming transparent.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jaypee?
Exactly. And, I think that they know this moment has been coming. This is why they're applying so much pressure to us, because their time is running out, and they're trying to overwhelm us, because this is the weakness that they've found so far with humans. You can overwhelm them, right? Throw more than 3 things at once and boom. But we're learning to work in teams, so that we got an eye out on all directions. and this is because there's only so few of them, and there are many of us. We can have many eyes on all their situations, and collective and distributed information. Like I say, anything that any of these radio shows that people listen to, that they say, oh look, this guy, he's from Disclosure Project, so he'll have a nugget, and people listen to these little nuggets and build up the big picture on a morphological field basis. I love what you were saying about the Germans were using these chanting techniques and meditations and group meditations, and what we were talking about is essentially group visualizations. And my co-host Nancy Hopkins has written a book called Cosmic Reality, which has these this list of rules in there, which is like majority rules. So if you create a reality, and more than one person, more than two people, more than three, more and more, believe in it and accept it as a reality, as a given reality, then it becomes real. And so that's exactly what they were doing. And that's the essence of what magic is, whether it's black or white.
Yes, there was a gentleman who I met in San Diego. Oh God, it's slipping my mind all of a sudden. Anyway, he was in Guinness Book of World Records because he had this experience where he was underwater for like 4 hours. He should have been dead, but he was with a group of in the Bermuda Triangle with a bunch of there was 7 altogether divers looking for treasure, and the sands blew away. You probably can help me on this. I just got you get a blank sometimes. Anyway, he found this ancient civilization that looked kind of like white marble and looked like Mayan. It was all like perfectly preserved underneath the sand, and it was this huge pyramid. It was about 3 times the size of the Giza pyramid, with the polished white limestone and a crystalline capstone. And we found an entrance, and he went in, and the whole room and everything was illuminated from some unknown light source. And in the center of this room there was 7 chairs, one a little higher than the other, and in the middle of that there was a pedestal with 2 hands holding this about the size of a tennis ball, a quartz sphere, a very unusual quartz sphere, with a golden rod coming down from the ceiling tipped with a red type crystal pointing at it, and looked like intense heat and burning. It seems as though that structure may have very well been part of Atlantis, and that the minds that were surrounding that crystal, focusing on it into the grid matrix, may have very well been affecting the matrix. Back in the 90s, I got from the CIA all their UFO documents that they were released anyway. I found a whole lot of documents on, let's see, what was his name? He is New Zealand airline,
Bruce Cathy.
There we go. Yes, thank you. Having a hard time with names tonight.
Yeah, it happens, it's aluminium,
But he found that a lot of these UFOs were going on certain paths that were on these ley lines, and that he found that underneath the ocean there was these, and above the ocean as well, there was certain unusual looking antennas. So you have to wonder, the black magicians of the current technology are. Maybe it seems as though that energy from one dimension shifts from one geometrical frequency into the next in a vortexing manner at these nodal points where these grid lines connect. And, ancients, and you're well aware of this, it would tap into these centers in order and just like in the body, where you can affect the body with the acupuncture points, you can affect more greatly into the main trunk lines of the meridians of the body, and the earth is the same way. And whatever happens in the body affects the consciousness as well. And so, but the one thing we have going for us is that the light is more powerful than the dark. And that truth is more powerful than a lie, and that our very but still they work with everything they've got in order to manipulate and control mankind, so they can maintain this entitled elite status above the rest of humanity, because they have, been born into all of this wealth and or wherever the connections are, or the mindset of the fascist thinking. And you have to wonder about, the Middle Eastern things with Al-Qaeda and ISIS and everything. And the United States produces, I think it's something like 75% of the weapons in the world. And it kind of goes along with the old Rothschild plan, to arm everybody to the hilt, and then it's kind of send in the false flags or provocateurs and watch everybody just annihilate themselves. And one thing I find interesting is that Himmler, he was, by the way, he escaped as well, along with Hitler, and they were well aware of that. He was very interested in studying karma. Like, in other words, what effect would that have, the things that he was doing on his own spiritual evolution? I haven't been able to find more information on that, but I found that kind of interesting, that how people do things and hold off the wrath of the repercussions of their actions through the universal laws of karma. What's your thoughts on that, Jaypee?
Well, I think that is the essence of what the Black Lodge do. That's their modus operandi. They kick the can down the road, like this thing about what Greece did. Greece borrowed from the IMF to pay the interest payments on their IMF loan. Yeah? That's exactly the operation of what how they work karma.
I asked Dr. Greer about that when I first met with him, because I was very familiar with, I built a number of radionic instruments, and I'm very well aware that what you do, if you do something to somebody else, you do it to your own energy field. And I was wondering, well, if these psychic assassins or whatever that do this, with the advanced augmented technology, that advanced from the Soviets and the Americans, that have advanced considerably. How do they get around with the karma? And he was saying that they actually, there was like young guys that they raised specifically for this task, that basically they sacrifice themselves to accomplish these goals. And I'm just wondering, if you have somebody else do something, like if I paid a hitman to kill somebody, does the hitman take on the karma? Or it would seem very well that I would take on the karma for initiating that whole action, wouldn't you think?
Are you the hand or the trigger?
Right.
And the hitman is the trigger. That's what you pay him to do. That's what you've trained him to do. You've made him that way. And so he is your finger, doing what it does. So it's an interesting thing, and maybe he found. I mean, he's probably done the same thing that. Have you seen Dogma, the film Dogma, where these two fallen angels try to figure out through some Catholic dogma that they're able to redeem themselves and go back to heaven. You know, I don't know if you've ever seen that film, but it's like they're kind of embedding themselves again. They're kicking themselves. They're taking out interest on the loan that they're making payments for. It's just trying to extend time, because it's a matter of time before the whole thing collapses in on itself.
That's what I see too. Yeah, and I think if they can instigate things like, say, fill your entertainment with the imagery of all the psychological analysis of this, with all the imagery of people killing, and if you notice in television, they're getting into more gross torturing scenes and things like that.
I have indeed.
I check into it. I check into it ever so often, but. If people get that, I forget who said it, but he was big in the mainstream media, that people have a tendency to want to recreate into their waking life what they perceive, and the television with all this imagery of people killing each other and reacting this way. Well, if people give consent to that. I talk back to my TV all the time. I do not give consent to a lot of things I see, and I think it's important that we do not give consent, especially as the human race is waking up to the deception that's been perpetrated upon them, that we no longer give consent to the actions that they've been doing in secrecy. And the only way they can do this is through the deception and illusion, where they affect people to the fact that people start creating their own karma, and start doing things to other people in a way that they're karmically off the hook. They can let's say a war. Let's say they funded all the weapons for both sides, and then all of a sudden they throw in a false flag, and one side, oh, A did it, no, B did it, and then they kill each other. And it was all of a deception, where everybody was fighting and killing each other that didn't need to happen, but that formula has worked. I ended up in the Vietnam War in combat action because of the false flag Gulf of Tonkin situation. World War II, they had the code broken way ahead of time, but they needed to get into the war, so they sacrificed all those sailors in Pearl Harbor. And, as everybody who's starting to become awake and aware, knows, the 9/11 situation was another false flag event. And it seems that, look at all the actions that have all the NDAA, the Patriot Act, the Project BioShield, with billions of dollars of these experimental vaccines, and just recently, California has created a law for mandatory vaccination of all the children. You have to look at, if you unravel everything back to where the false flags start and everything was justified hinging on that platform, you pull the rug out from under it, and all those actions that followed that event all crumble down and fall away. So the human race is just starting to wake up to this cabal that's been manipulating it, and thanks to radio shows like yours.
Well, we're putting the pieces together because humanity's been fragmented, like MK Ultra victims, survivors. Sorry, there's going to be a word. I've been sort of pondering this, that one day there will be a word for people who have been through these terrible mind control programs, but have turned everything around and are whole beings despite everything that's happened to them. That have really survived beyond that. These people will almost be like Ubermensch, really truly Supermen and women, because they'll have overcome so much. And still manage to beam out love and be human and humane. And I think that's the transformation of what has to happen to the super soldiers to turn their programming outwards and to help. In conclusion, I'd like to say you really have got the chat room going on Revolution Radio. They're jumping up and down. They're really into it. Thank you so much. It's been a really excellent show. We've had lots of information. As I said, we're all up to speed. I'd love to have you back to just continue this rabbit hole. Please stay alive.
Oh, I'd love to, Jaypee.
So let everybody know how to find you, how to get to your stuff. I've posted your thing. You can come to Ever Beyond Radio and see the show notes. But tell everybody who's listening on the radio land.
Yeah, the article I wrote for this company in Hollywood, it kind of woke me up to piecing together, and all the references are there. You can find it at www.thewebmatrix.net, not .com, but .net. And also we talked about, some of the research work with Dr. Marcel Vogel, and that was at marcelvogel.org. I don't sell any CDs or books or anything. I make absolutely no money at this. I'm just a concerned planetary citizen that wants to see the rest of the human race, freed from the deceptions on this planet.
Dan Willis, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much. This has been Journeys with Jaypee. I'll see you on Sunday on Ever Beyond Radio on wolfspiritradio.com. Thank you so much. Good night, everybody.